Okay, let's dive right in. We live in a world that is frankly obsessed with public platforms, really loud voices, and highly visible success. But in this explainer, we are going to unpack a fascinating historical document called The Forgotten Ministry. And it flips that entire script. It reveals how a quiet, seemingly ordinary action, just active encouragement, actually holds the profound power to change history, save lives, and completely alter the course of generations. I'm absolutely thrilled to guide you through this material today because honestly, it redefines what it means to truly support someone. To keep us on track, here's our roadmap for the explainer. We're going to hit 1. The Forgotten Ministry. 2. Strengthening the weary. 3. Silencing fear. 4. Pursuing the forgotten. And finally, 5. The Eternal Harvest. Let's get started. Kicking things off with Section 1. The Forgotten Ministry and the Unseen Battle in Rome. Now, when we picture great historical figures, we usually imagine them as, totally invincible. But take a look at this startling admission from the Apostle Paul. Without were fightings, within were fears. Notice he didn't say within was faith. Despite his immense legacy, he was brutally honest about his own human frailty and spiritual weariness. It's a great reminder that even the absolute greatest leaders experience seasons where the burden just feels crushing, the opposition is relentless, and they are standing right on the edge of quitting. The source text introduces this completely unsung hero named Onesiphorus, a guy who stepped directly into Paul's darkest hour. Think about the setting. Paul is chained in a freezing Roman dungeon, carrying the literal scars of beatings and facing the very real shadow of execution. But right in the middle of that suffocating isolation, Onesiphorus shows up. He became this vital channel of grace that Paul made sure history would never, ever forget. Moving right along to Section 2, Strengthening the Weary and the Remedy of Refreshing. It's often said that God sustains his people, but this text really points out how he almost always does it through other people. The author illustrates this perfectly using the Greek word anapsuho, which means to revive or restore. Onesiphorus literally brought a refreshing breeze into a suffocating dungeon. To encourage someone in this context means bringing breathable relief to an exhausted soul. It's just like the historical account of Aaron and Hur physically holding up the exhausted hands of Moses during a fierce battle. Sometimes true encouragement is literally just helping someone hold their hands up for one more day. The source material hits us with this really vivid juxtaposition, and it asks a tough diagnostic question. Do our own communities operate as restorative refreshment stations or draining battlefields of criticism? Do people leave our presence feeling stronger or weaker? Are we acting like constant inspectors and critics, or like comforters handing out cold water to a thirsty soul? Which brings us to Section 3, Silencing Fear, where we look at courage over convenience. We kind of default to thinking encouragement is just, sending a quick text with a smiley face. But this text argues that biblical encouragement requires actual, incredible bravery. Stepping into Nero's Rome to ask around for the prisoner Paul was a profound act of conviction over convenience. Those chains symbolized suffering, rejection, and immense political danger. Every single inquiry Onesiphorus made invited deadly suspicion from Roman guards, yet he flat out refused to let his own personal safety dictate his loyalty. The sermon draws a super sharp line here, contrasting fair-weather admirers who scatter the second chains appear, with true friends who step closer during suffering. The crowds absolutely loved Paul when he was successful in performing miracles, right? But the moment the chains appeared, those admirers fled. True friends, like Onesiphorus, are the ones who deliberately move closer when the darkness sets in. Ultimately, biblical encouragement acts as a massive focal shift. It's spiritual reinforcement that points people back to the unbreakable promises of God. It's not just emotional support. It is a recalibration of reality. Think of David at Ziklag. Having lost absolutely everything, he had to encourage himself in his God. Fear tells you the giant standing in front of you is way too big. True encouragement comes in and taps you on the shoulder to remind you that your God is bigger. All right, on to Section 4, Pursuing the Forgotten and the Anatomy of Encouragement. According to the source document, finding one specific prisoner in the massive, dark obscurity of the Roman system was not exactly a walk in the park. It required repeated, highly costly effort. Roman prisoners could easily just disappear into the machinery of the empire, and a lot of people just assumed Paul was entirely lost to history. But one man refused to accept that. We can actually break this pursuit down into a sort of anatomy of encouragement. It moves in 3 steps, from the initial desire to seek, to determined perseverance, and finally to the compassion that physically locates the suffering. Love isn't passive, it moves. Onesiphorus sought Paul very diligently, totally refusing to give up after a closed door. It's very much like the Good Samaritan who actively crossed the road toward the pain. Think about the sheer psychological impact of being found. When you're isolated, the loudest voice in your head tells you that you are entirely forgotten. The very act of someone showing up to find you completely shatters that darkness. As the text notes, some people out there don't need another lecture, they don't need another sermon, they just desperately need someone to come looking for them. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, the eternal harvest and the ripple effect of grace. While the immediate relief of this kind of encouragement is very earthly, the text assures us its legacy is eternal. Humans have terribly short memories, but heaven keeps perfect records of every single prayer, visit, and encouraging word. Paul shifts the focus entirely to the judgment seat here, reminding us that absolutely nothing done in the name of authentic support is ever wasted. To really grasp this ripple effect, let's look at the historical timeline. When Barnabas stepped up to encourage a converted, heavily doubted man named Saul, he had no idea he was unleashing the Apostle Paul onto the world. Because of that one guy's encouragement, epistles were written that we literally still read today, and churches were planted all over. One encourager fundamentally changed the course of human history for millennia. Crazy to think about, right? The author paints this incredibly vivid picture of an unseen harvest. Seemingly small acts of support are revealed to have kept leaders, missionaries, and everyday people from just giving up on their calling. Imagine the day when the full harvest is revealed, and you find out that a leader stayed faithful because of a simple letter you wrote, or a young student didn't quit because you took 5 minutes to pray with them. The words you speak to someone today can bear fruit that way outlasts your own lifetime. So, as we conclude this explainer, we are left with a really provocative, deeply personal question to ponder. Whose Onesiphorus are you called to be? It's not really a question of if we need encouragement, but rather who is out there right now, exhausted, feeling totally forgotten, and praying for God to send someone. If heaven keeps perfect records of our support, whose history are you going to change today?